Well, we really didn't have any signs or symptoms, and that's why this is. I mean, just to even talk about this cause is that it really can hit anybody, and you have no idea when it's going to happen. Cooper was extraordinarily physical child, very kind of met all his milestones early. Happy kid, didn't had no issues at all. Every now and again we'd have an ear infection, and I'm a parent who doesn't typically get really freaked out. Actually, I was pretty laid back, but I started to notice. We actually had one incident. It was back in May of 2009, and Cooper. We were out visiting family, and all of a sudden Cooper had this kind of weird episode, and it was just very odd. It almost looked like a little seizure, and it was out of the blue. He'd had nothing prior to that whatsoever. And we rushed him to emergency room and found that they looked at him and said he has a slight fever. He looks like he has a virus. We actually even attributed it to him having his shots, his 2-year shots. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of thought, well, it's no big deal. We'll watch him closely. So we brought him home, and really nothing happened. So a couple weeks go by, and then he started complaining of having neck pain. And he's 2, and he was very vocal, fortunately, because he actually could point to his neck and say, "Mommy, my neck hurts." And so we kind of, we're like, well, that's not normal. And we thought, well, it could be a couple things. He could have just, thrown his neck out playing. There's a lot of things that can happen. So we brought him into the doctor, and the doctor said, he has no other signs or symptoms. There's nothing going on with him. And so this continued, though. About every week, he'd start to, and he'd want to lay down. So we'd lay him down, he'd stand back up, and he was fine. And he'd go, for hours and hours and hours. And then this started to continually get a little worse. And I was in the doctor probably twice a week for about 2 months. I mean, I was in there saying there's something wrong with him. And there was nothing else that would show up. And the weird thing was is that all of a sudden he'd just actively go back and play and just be fine. There was no vomiting. There was not even any what they call gait changes where you can't walk normally. And so really what happened was I just thought to myself, this is not normal for a child to have these kind of issues. So we went to an orthopedic surgeon and we said, can you please look at him and make sure there's not some kind of alignment problem. They made him move his neck around a little bit. They said they ran some autoimmune tests on him. Nothing came back. Everything was normal. And then we asked to see a rheumatologist. And unfortunately, this rheumatologist was kind enough to say, let's just run an MRI, because he could tell I was starting to get frantic. And we'd been doing this for over 2 months. And he, he's like, well, let's run an MRI. And everyone's hesitant to do MRIs because they put them under anesthesia. And fortunately, I knew somebody in the hospital who actually moved our MRI up to a week after that appointment. We were scheduled not to go for another 2 more months. And at that point, we got him in for the MRI, and it was an evening. And I remember Justin and I walking around the hospital, and we had gone to get coffee. And I walk out of the coffee shop, and this was actually over at UNC Hospital, and we walk out of the coffee shop, and I look at him, and I see a little boy who looked like he was undergoing chemotherapy. And I said, oh, how lucky we are. We are the most blessed family not to have a child with cancer. It was that day. And we went back into, to sit down where we would receive the news. And we remember the doctor walking into the MRI room, and it was the rheumatologist, and he wouldn't make eye contact with us. He said hello, and he walked back. And we could I looked at Justin and I said, something's not right. And we went back in there, and he looked at us and he said, Mr. and Mrs. Herman, I've never had to tell a family in my life that their child has a brain tumor. We don't tell families that as rheumatologists. And he goes, but Cooper has a brain tumor, and we need you to deal with it right now. And he had severe hydrocephalus. And I mean, it just tells you. What is that? And that's where he had so much fluid on his brain that it can't even believe the child was actually standing up, because the amount of fluid would typically cause you or I or we would be on the floor laying down, or like we said, vomiting, or just so sick. And I don't know, his just pain tolerance was just so amazing that we dealt with it. But I mean, that day, I'll never forget every moment of that particular time. And I remember just saying, what do we do now? And we actually, we were rushed by ambulance to Duke and admitted into Duke. And they went ahead and, we're trying to figure out, what's the next step? How quickly do we need to deal with this and start into surgery? So 2 days later, he had a 13-hour craniotomy to remove the tumor. And it was, I remember starting at 1 o'clock and him finishing it around 2 a.m. in the morning.
For your little baby.
Yeah.
Small, carry him in 2 hands.
Tiny little boy. And And I you know, and the thing is it's not just, I mean, I have a daughter too. I have, at the time, she was, you know, well, she's 5.5 years old, and this world stopped, and I was like, what do I do with my daughter? What do I do? You know, you just don't know what to do with your life all of a sudden. It's, nothing else matters. And fortunately, we have such wonderful friends and so forth that helped us. But we got to Duke, and our amazing doctor, Dr. Gerald Grant. I mean, I can't even tell you, he means the world to us. Was able to remove the entire tumor. At the time, it was a gross total resection, they called it, and he talked about how he went in there and it was just this layering all of his, what they call his posterior fossa and his brainstem area, which obviously you can't breathe without your brainstem. Your brainstem controls your whole body. And so they were able to remove it all. It was just, but it was, you know, I remember sitting there on pins and needles and him coming in and telling us that, and we were just shocked. And they said, well, we need to figure out what this is. So after running it through pathology, they found it to be an ependymoma, which is probably, there's about 100 of these diagnosed a year, maybe 100 of this particular type of brain tumor. And it can be kind that we were talking about which is a good brain tumor, if there's such a thing. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, this one can be good. It can also not be good. And at the time, it was, you know, it looked to be kind of in an area they got most of it. But unfortunately, since then, we've had some things occur where it's come back.